Hi. So, is it okay to play 1 hour of video games a day? This is obviously like kind of inspired by, Hamza, since he has that entire thing of like being kind of against that like 1 hour of video games thing. And yeah, so I guess this is in a sense sort of a response video, but not really. It's just my genuine thoughts on the whole thing. Yeah. So to start off with, I think it only makes sense to kind of go over the fact that if you clicked on a video about whether or not it's okay to play video games for 1 hour a day, you probably already have some sort of like idea in your mind that it might not be okay, which could be telling, that yeah, maybe it isn't. But I'm not really aiming to tell you what you should or shouldn't do with this video. I'm just giving my thoughts on the thing and some things to consider if you're yourself considering whether or not to actually give up video games entirely, or just like the 1 hour video games thing is kind of just an example. It doesn't need to be 1 hour, it could be more, it could be less, and the point still stands of like one of the questions that this immediately raises is that can you actually play just 1 hour or whatever time you would be playing? So like if your goal is to play 1 hour, but you usually when you're playing you suddenly notice that like an hour and a half has gone by, like does that happen a lot? And when you actually do play, like can you actually get off the game like easily, or are you tempted just go play one more game or one more level, one more area, whatever, one more quest? Or can you just like, okay, done, and I'm putting the game down now? Like these are all things you really should consider. And like one thing that's very important to keep in mind is like, what do you spend your time on in general? So what this really comes down to is, assuming you would stop playing video games entirely, what are you gonna do with that time now? If the answer is, I'm gonna go do some good habits, some like self-improvement related stuff, be it work, whether that would be like work on a business or work on yourself, or like maybe you go and spend time with friends or family, like anything like that, then obviously like there's no question about the fact that that's way better. And again, but yeah, if you stop playing video games entirely and your solution, instead of going to do good habits, you go and you go out and you get drunk, then obviously I'd recommend play the 1 hour video games like instead, because I think it's pretty clear that that's not as damaging, or at least in my opinion isn't. But yeah, I think it's pretty clear from how I'm speaking that like I am of the opinion that video games are like inherently an unproductive thing. I don't think video games are ever really that productive of an option. Like, I'm not saying that like you can't have some productivity in video games. Like, some games maybe can help you with like, you know, I don't know, teamwork skills or something like that. Like, no question, there probably are games that can do that, but like inherently speaking, there would be like, there are better options out there to do all of these things. So you know, video games never the best option, but but the question arises, like, do you actually want to be productive all the time? I mean, obviously it would be better if you actually were productive all the time, but at the same time, if like 23 of your waking hours are spent productively and 1 hour is spent unproductively, that's still a pretty damn good ratio. Now, that doesn't excuse the 1 hour, but it does raise the question, like, are you satisfied with that 23 hours of productivity? Or do you feel like you have to get that 1 extra hour in? This is something that really comes down to what you really want. I mean, are you going to achieve all your goals with that 23-hour productivity or not? Like, if you feel like you can easily take 1 hour of your time a day to do like whatever, like video games, then I'm not gonna tell you not to. But really do consider some of these factors. And like, I do want to mention that productivity is not just work. Like, productivity, I think the best way to really describe it is anything that's good for you, especially like long term, or like not really, you know, yeah, anything that's good for you long term. I guess it's fine if it's good for you short term, as long as it does not harm you long term. So yeah, like that, those sorts of things are productive, I think. And yeah, and yeah, you don't really have to be productive all the time, but if you decide not to be, you better be aware of the consequences. You better be willing to accept the fact that this is gonna hold you back in some areas. You're gonna progress slower. So yeah, I mean, anytime you spend on anything unproductive, that's time taken away from, you know, or time that you could be spending on something productive. And yeah. So really try to think about whether or not playing video games is a good idea for you. I myself don't even know what my ultimate goal with the video games is actually. I've just simply reduced the time from what it used to be, but I haven't given them up completely, and don't know if I will. Maybe I will. I'm certainly not against the idea. Like I'm not so die-hard on like keeping off video games. It's just that for me to give them up, the rest of my life has to be good enough to actually do that, if that makes sense. And yeah, I mean, I do want to mention that, like, if you're like really into gaming right now, or have been, or whatever, you're playing like however many hours, I don't know, let's take an example, 8 hours a day. I'm not like, don't jump to 0 right away, or even like 1, like gradually decrease it. Like, please, you're not gonna be able to just suddenly stop something that you've been spending like all your time on. Like, rather just slowly replace a bit of that time with something productive instead, and over time you will just be able to reduce more and more. But yeah, if you do end up playing games for whatever amount of time, especially if you've only started considering like reducing the time, I do suggest you try to do it pretty controllably. What I mean by that is, like, when playing, make sure you're actually having fun playing. So don't just play for the sake of it. Avoid games that make you feel bad afterwards. If, one of the reasons I've never really played competitive games is because, quite frankly, people are assholes. And they just make me feel bad. Like, whenever you lose, like, people tend to like really rub it in your face, and even when you win, people are salty as hell, like. So that's why I never really got all that much into competitive games. I think it's a pretty damn toxic environment. And I mean, maybe competitive games are fine for you, but like, if you're anything like me with the fact that, like, whenever you play competitive games you just feel bad, or honestly even worse, like, you rage, preferably play something else, really. I mean, games are really, really not worth getting like upset or angry over. Just, if you're not having fun with a game, don't play it. And this feels so funny to say, because like, when I myself played video games, and like, let's say I got really frustrated doing something, like, I don't know, fighting a boss. Yeah, sure, let's take that as an example, that I couldn't beat, and I got frustrated over it, and then someone like my mother would be like, take a break, like, don't play if you're getting upset. And I just, honestly, that just pissed me more out even more, because it's like, I had to search, like, well, I can't just quit now, I gotta do it. And yeah, if that's something that, if you get pissed off at video games, don't play those types of video games. Play something that doesn't make you pissed off, or just don't play at all. Yeah. Thankfully, that's something I've personally gotten over a lot. I mean, I don't really tend to get angry at video games like basically ever anymore. And that's really, really good. But I do get upset, like I mentioned, in like something like a competitive game when someone is like a douchebag about winning, you know, or like a really sore loser, like, and that's why I tend to stick away from them. And one thing I would still like to mention is, like, if you decide to mostly quit video games, but like, let's say there's a video game series you really like, you're really invested in the story, you've been following it for years or whatever, like that's just an example, and every now and then, like every few years, let's say, a new game comes out, and you like really want to play it. Fine, play it when it comes out. Like, if you genuinely are like care about the story, care about the game and the world and whatever that much, that like that alone is like kind of keeping you from quitting video games, like you can still play it, just don't really like, you know, be a gamer. Like, don't play hours or like a certain amount per day, but rather when a game you really care about comes out, play through that, and then just be done with gaming until like the next game that you really, really want to play comes out. So like, unless you're really enjoying a game in general, why play it? Like, really? Like, there's that one Nintendo meme of like, if it's not fun, why play it? But like, I know it's kind of a meme, but like, it's funny. I mean, it's true. I mean, video games are meant to be entertaining, so I feel people take them way too seriously. I mean, obviously, if you're really like going pro or whatever, you should take video games seriously. But like, for most people, they're not doing that. It's an incredibly competitive environment, and the average person who just plays video games is not going competitive. And I can most certainly assure that anybody who watches a video, especially this far into a video, about whether or not you actually should even play video games, is most certainly not going pro. So yeah, I mean, the only real way I see video games like being productive, like generally speaking, like obviously, once again, like I mentioned before, that teamwork example, like, is if they help you make money. If you make YouTube videos or stream on Twitch or whatever, if through video games you make money, sure. I mean, sure, go ahead. I mean, why not? But even there, the same principle applies, that like, if you start hating video games and you know, basically now your job, which would be video games, you know, don't play. Really, like, then consider doing something else instead, so pursuing another way of earning money. But yeah, I mean, I'll just kind of end with these closing words of like, gaming isn't good, like, basically ever, but it's up to you whether or not you actually think all of your time should be spent on something that's like good, productive. Yeah, that's my take on the entire 1 hour video games a day thing. See ya.